Yeah, I think I'm turned on. Everybody hear me? Turned on. Okay. Well, I'm turned on about the science of broth. And I'm the naughty nutritionist. And this particular book was actually in the works for more than 20 years. Because during the phase where I was preoccupied with things like anti-aging and being juicy for life, well, I'm an overachiever, and I said, why just age well? Why not live forever? And then I heard this South American saying, good broth will resurrect the dead. Well, that really got me excited. So I became very interested in broth. And I have some really bad news for you folks. I worked for more than 20 years, books, research, studies, scratching my head, and I'm sorry to say broth will not resurrect the dead. And I studied broth and soup traditions all over the world, and nowhere did I find that broth will resurrect the dead. Nor have I found that it will help you live forever. But what I have found is broth will help you be super. So a lot of us already know that because it's a familiar saying that chicken soup is Jewish penicillin. We've all heard that, right? And there's some wisdom in that. And it actually goes back to the 12th century Moses Maimonides. And of course, he wasn't using the word penicillin, which is a 20th century invention. But he recognized the healing power of chicken soup to heal all sorts of diseases, from infections to things like leprosy. And his information going back even farther to Galen to Hippocrates. And besides that, there's a long tradition of broth being valued in what was once called convalescent cookery or invalid cookery. And most cookbooks from the late 18th century through the mid-20th century always had a chapter on what was called invalid cookery. And they would use sayings like, this will cure for sure, or in my experience, this has always proved beneficial.
All right, so I'd like to start by talking a little bit about my own personal experience with vegetarianism. When I was 18, I read a book called Diet for a New America by John Robbins, and this book advocated a vegetarian or even vegan diet, meaning a diet that excludes all animal products, including even eggs and milk, on the basis of basically three arguments. The first of which was factory farming is cruel to animals, which of course it is. The second of which was that the production of animal products is ecologically unsound, which it often is. And the third argument, probably the most contentious in these circles, is that animal products cause disease. Of course, at the time I found this very convincing because I was young and naive. And I became a vegetarian. 6 months later I became a vegan. But this dietary journey did not lead me to any promised land. On the contrary, I developed numerous health problems, including fatigue, digestive issues, tooth decay, and anxiety. But these, for the most part, with the exception of the fatigue, weren't really new problems for me. They were just serious aggravation of pre-existing problems to the point where they became very interfering in my life. My digestion worsened to the point where I was often writhing on the floor in pain. Tooth decay I had since I was a child, like many children get tooth decay, but in this case, I had gone to my dentist and found out that I had a dozen cavities and needed 2 root canals. And I had anxiety disorders, including phobias, panic attacks, some OCD going back into my early teens. But by this point, my phobias had progressed to the point of sheer paranoia, and I was having panic attacks not occasionally in response to certain specific stimuli, but regularly 2 to 3 times per week. So I was vegan for a year. After that, I started over the course of 6 months slowly adding animal products back into my diet, eggs, milk, eventually fish. These didn't seem to make the problems go away. But that Christmas, after I'd been vegetarian for about a total of 2 years, I added red meat back into my diet, and I ate copious amounts of it. And 2 weeks later, I had my last panic attack.
Thank you all for coming today. I'm really happy to be here. I've been doing this talk now for a couple years, and it's usually been more of a cooking demo. So forgive me if I stutter a little bit because I'm used to kind of showing the different stages as we go along. Has anybody here, have you been trying to experiment yet with making your own broth? Oh, good. You guys are already well on your way. All right, so if you've made your broth and you've chilled it, is it getting gelatinous? Is it getting gelatiny? It is. Sometimes? Okay. So that's the key. That's what you want. And that's when, if you get a real gelatinous broth, you can do a little dance in your kitchen. Right on. That's what you want, because then you know you got the right things in there. So yes, I'm the chapter leader in Pittsburgh. And just to give you a little bit of background on me, my mother was a great cook. She always cooked from scratch. So I grew up on bone broth. It was just part of the process. We always had homemade soup stocks. She made a lot of homemade bread. I was really fortunate to grow up with somebody that knew how to cook. And, unfortunately today, too many of us don't get those skills passed down. We've forgotten how to cook. So dive in and just go for it.
I just want to take a quick little poll. How many of you are here primarily because you're interested in doing more soups and stews at home? Just a show of hands. Okay. And how many of you are here because you're interested in either community-supported kitchen model or some kind of commercial application of this? Okay, so a few of both. So I'm going to talk about both, but that helps me to tailor the talk a little bit to more what people are interested in. Is there somebody talking? Is there some? Maybe it's the other room. Okay, I have to just block that out. There's some other sounds going on. So, the beauty of broth-based soups and stews. So the other thing I want to say is that if you got your handouts at the back, if you could please put them away, I would really appreciate that. Just stick them under your chair or somewhere. They're meant to be something that you can take home and gives you reference so you don't have to take notes and stuff like that. But as much as you can be present with what I'm saying here, I think that's great. And then when you look at it afterwards, it'll make more sense, in other words, once I go through this. So the first thing I just want to emphasize is how incredibly important broth-based soups and stews are in the cuisines of the world. I don't think you can really say too much about how important these foods are in terms of the daily sustenance of people all around this planet. And that's part of what I'm going to try to capture here in this talk is the breadth of different approaches that people have used, and then also try to communicate what I do and how to bring it home, so to speak. So we have everything on this planet from really thick stews and curries to broths, consommes, and clear soups.
The theme of this conference is honoring the sacred foods. We've heard some very interesting talks about these sacred foods. It doesn't hurt to redefine the sacred foods. They were foods that primitive peoples believed to be very important for preconception, pregnant and nursing mothers, and for growing children. It was during this period of formation of the baby, getting ready for that baby, and during the period of growth. And I can't stress enough, those are the windows of opportunity. You cannot go back after the body's formed and reform the body. Dr. Price analyzed these foods and found them to be extremely rich in what we call the fat-soluble activators. These are vitamins A, D, and vitamin K2, the animal form of vitamin K. So our rallying cry is not remember the Alamo, but remember the activators. A lot of people say, oh, the Weston A. Price Foundation is about lots of meat or low carb or fermented foods. We're about the activators. That is our number one message to get out there. What they are, how they work, what's in our food, and how to get these foods on people's tables. Dr. Price called them activators because they are catalysts for mineral absorption. Without the activators in our diet, we cannot absorb and utilize not only minerals but also protein, no matter how abundant in the diet or in the foods that we eat.